Good afternoon, everybody. This is Jeff Morton. It is Sunday, the 28th day of July, and I want to thank you all for joining me here on Let's Talk About It. Before I get into the show, my guest, of course, is my good friend, Dr. Dina Dye. She's a returning guest, and of course, we did a podcast for 2.5 years. So we have very familiar conversations, almost symbiotic at times, because I think so much of what I have learned from her is just really part of what I have come to understand these last 16 years about my biblical research and study. But before I get started, I want to tell you a little bit about the program itself. My show is not exclusively about religious stuff, faith-based stuff, biblical stuff. I'm really trying to reach out to people who are actively involved in making a difference in the lives of people. That's kind of what this is all about. I'm doing something a little different. However, I am a conservative in the way that I understand the country that I live in. I support the republic that gave birth to all of us, called these United States of America. And I am, of course, biblically minded from a historical perspective, not necessarily from a church mindset. Of course, that's been a genesis and a journey for me as I continue to learn from an unlimited resource, that being the Bible. Anyway, as I go through this process of developing this podcast, I've got to spend money, I've got to divert stuff and change things around and figure out some kind of a budget to do all of this. And so it just takes time to really get what I'm trying to get. So we're about to do show number 14. And hopefully by the time we get to number 20, I will have figured all of this out. I have upgraded the camera. I have a person coming here to show me a little bit more about lighting and how to put this thing together so that it's a little bit more professional. And I'm just investing some time and money into making this better than I'm able to make it. So stay tuned. We're going to keep doing this. And all of this is coming out of Jeff Morton's pocket, so it takes a little bit more time than I'd like it to. Having said all of that, my guest today is Dr. Dina Dye, as I mentioned. Dina and I have known each other for several years now. I really met her. I searched her out because of the way that she understood the biblical story as a Jewish woman who accepted the Messiah from a Jewish framework. And she has been spending the last 40 plus years trying to bring that concept or those concepts into the New Testament theology and exegesis that we in the West have lived under for the last 1800 years. Her take is a lot different than most pastors and most ministers that you know of, and she brings to the conversation a lot of the Hebraic thought and context that make this a little bit challenging actually a lot challenging, to be honest, for the Western mind to kind of encapsulate in their theological studies. With me, though, it's like symbiotic. I click with a lot of what she teaches. I don't need it explained to me. It's relative to what's in my own head. So she's been the most prominent person in my life to unravel the things that happened to me in 2007, because I can identify with what she's talking about. And Dina's not always necessarily talking about a religious understanding of the Bible, and that's where a lot of people get lost. Anyway, I'm going to play a short video about her website, what she does, and then we'll welcome Dina Dye to the program. Well, hello there, my good friend, Dr. Dina Dye. How are you today?
I'm well, my friend, Jeff. I actually, as you were doing the introduction, I thought, I have a title for my next book. It was going to be called The Wandering Jew, but it might be called Another Misunderstood Jew.
Yeah, that's probably good. I think both titles are good.
Yeah.
And like I always say, reading all of the Bible from Genesis to Revelation, you can learn a lot from a Jew. Hey, my
Yeah.
good friend, it's let's see, you were one of my first shows when we started doing this podcast. So thank you for agreeing to come on again today. And of course, we're
Oh,
going to
my
talk about,
pleasure. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. We're going to talk about a mad, mad, mad world.
You might want to add a few mads onto that.
Well, you and I have talked privately, back and forth, and it's been crazy. I
Crazy.
mean, you just told me something that I didn't know. We'll talk about that a little later. But as biblically minded people, where is God in all of this? Where is God? And I have said for probably a year and a half now that God is extremely visible to the life of Donald Trump to me. And because he has been through just about everything we can throw at him, and now an assassination attempt on his life, uh, and he's outlived all of it. So let's start there with the program. What do you think? What are your thoughts?
Well, it makes me think about just looking at the scriptures, because how many times did Israel, the Jewish people, go, where is God? When the Babylonians came in and destroyed the temple and hauled them off into exile, and they're there for what, 70 years, like, they had to be asking, where is God? I'm not seeing him. So it's easy to see how people would end up thinking that way. So, we've been talking the meaning sort of this assassination attempt. I'm not sure people are taking it or treating it as important and significant in the course of the history of the United States as it actually is. And of course, the media is working overtime with their propaganda machine to bury it. And then you have the FBI director coming out and saying it was some shrapnel, right? So, yes, that's how the empire will roll and bury this entire thing. But it's not that we've had. I mean, we've had a number of assassination attempts, and we've had a number of assassinations in our history. And it occurred to me that in my lifetime, I've seen one completed assassination with JFK, and then two attempted with Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump. So that's, I think, in the course of my lifetime, fairly significant. And
Well,
you always have to ask that question: why and for what purpose? What was there a purpose there with Ronald Reagan? Why did the Lord allow JFK to be taken out? And we still don't really. I mean, we kind of know. I mean, we sort of know, but we haven't had the full information revealed. It's all still classified. And now here we are again in a particularly important moment in history, and we're asking ourselves, what's God doing? What was the purpose of this? And of course, we all know that bullet grazed his head, and had he not turned his head, it had gone full force right through. And then what would that have created? What would have been the response for the country? So I don't want it to be buried. I'm encouraged by those who are determined to get to the bottom of this and find out what actually happened, if we are able. You can see that the government working overtime to make sure that never happens. And it makes me wonder too about the moment of that CrowdStrike hacking thing when everything went down. I just thank God I wasn't getting on an airplane. But you had your 911 services and airlines, and said, what was that all about? Was that some sort of dry run, or is that an attempt to bury the information again? So our question is, why, for what purpose? And I said earlier, I think everyone's going to have their why, but you and I have our why, so we're going to go with our why. And in my opinion, I know there's plenty in our community that do not like Donald Trump, but who I don't really care what you think about the man. And personally, we are headed for a very dark and difficult time, and not really just here in the United States, but worldwide. And so you can't look at a political figure as your savior. Please don't. Um,
absolutely.
and that. But God raises up leaders and rulers for particular times for a reason. And so we're asking ourselves, what might be the reason? And I honestly don't believe it's so he can get in office and make America great again. I simply, that's nice. Wouldn't that be great? But
Yeah,
that's not reality.
I'm so with you on that thought, Dina, but go ahead, continue.
Well, I would say in my mind, this is just my opinion, is that he has been raised up to shepherd us as a political leader through a dark time. And like I said, people have no idea what's ahead. I'm not even sure I understand what's ahead, but we need someone to kind of shepherd the country to prevent the country from completely breaking apart, and it may, I don't know, at a particular junction. And I still believe in that covenant that was God, that God made with the early pilgrims and the Puritans and established with the country. And it's interesting. Last night I was talking to a friend of mine. He travels a great deal for his work, and he's in Europe all the time. He's English, and in the Scandinavian countries, all over the place. So he just came back the other night from London, and he was doing work there. And his mother and his brother still live there. And I said to him, England's gone, London's gone. And what he said, his mother and brother don't think anything's going on. Like they're completely oblivious to what's happened to the city and to the country, and they're just in la land, hoping to buy their next car or whatever, and not seeing the complete takeover by Islam of England, and just all the stuff that is manufactured in the country. And he said it's the same thing in Paris. Of course, we can talk about what's going on in Paris, but all over Europe is just basically godless. And I said to him, the one thing that kind of gives me a little hope is, and I'm not here rah rah patriots, this boom ball with the blue, red, white, and blue. You know, I love my country, and I go out on July 4th and do all that. But I feel that the DNA of that covenant relationship God established with the nation is still here, and that there are many, many that understand that and love the country on that basis. And that, I know God, guns, whatever they want to say, but the fact that that hasn't evaporated and turned into, churches that are empty cathedrals like we see in Europe. And I just was in Europe, in France and Switzerland, and saw all these empty cathedrals. That gives me hope. And I know with the Revolutionary War, it didn't take everybody. And so perhaps as we struggle forward, this will be the same. So I'm actually optimistic, even though sometimes I'm really depressed.
Well, Dina, I think that was well said, and I kind of feel the same way. I know, just because I know the pattern and the playbook of historical, biblical, uh, the way things happen. The first thing you see is the degeneration of a society. Then you see the invasion of a warring country king that comes in and disrupts everything, crushes the government, and captures the people and begins to shift them all over the world. That's throughout biblical literature. The thing that I think about America, because I love this country, I think this country is amazing when we look at its foundation and why it was founded in the first place. But I'm with you. I don't know the kind of correction that we all might be facing, but if it lines up with anything that has gone on in the past, biblically speaking, we got some very dark times coming. I too have been asking the question. I mean, Dana, you got to understand. I've had people when the last election, I've had people contact me and say that Donald Trump would be reinstated as the president and this whole thing would be a farce. I even had one person say that the Galactic Empire was surrounding the Earth and was going to reinstate Donald Trump and destroy the cabal. And I was like, okay. Okay. So in addition to those people out there that believe in the nation and believe in the covenant, believe in the Constitution, we got some wacky folks out here in this nation as well. And it seems like you mentioned earlier before the show, one of the things that's missing behind everything that the United States represented is accountability. I mean, nobody is paying the price for bringing chaos into this nation. And we're all sitting here trying to figure out what happens next. And you mentioned the government, you mentioned JFK, all of these different things that we really don't have the answers to. It's because the government is controlling the information, and the media is literally their filter. That's what filters their information. So all these people that are out here in the country who don't do their own homework, their information is coming through a filtered organization promoted by a government that wants everything that is corrupt and really bad hidden. It reminds me of something Daniel McGurr did. He did a teaching called Honor and Shame. And I see this whole blanket of misinformation as something that is being coordinated by the media and the government to hide the shame of what's being done to destroy the fabric of this nation, certainly our Constitution. And I'm with you. The red, white, blue stuff, I started this show with the flag behind me. I love our flag, but it's a symbol. It's not my lifeblood. My lifeblood is God, and trying to figure out, God, what are you doing? Because at the end of the day, my hope, like you, and I'm sure you will agree with this, is in what he's doing. And that's why it's fascinating to me that he has managed to protect Donald Trump through everything that world governments, the cabal, all of our institutions, our courts, the justice system, everything that's in play against him has not stopped this man from getting up in the morning and persevering with what he's doing, even down to being just about killed. That to me is, I think God is using him as a herald to do something that most Americans, I think at the end of the day, most Americans are going to say, thank God we had Donald Trump when this happened. I don't know what this is.
I don't want people to think that just because he's in office, everything's going to be good.
It's not.
Exactly. And he, it's not that, suddenly inflation's going to go down. And, as much as I would love every single illegal, sent back packing and back to the nation from which they came, because no country can overcome an invasion like this. We've seen that's the reason Europe is falling. Paris, France, London, Luxembourg, Spain, all of them are going down because of the mass importation of illegals. And really, it is a tool of the empire going back, centuries, millennia. It's what Rome did. They did the exact same thing. So there's nothing new. So I don't want people to have this sort of Pollyanna rosy thing. If Trump just gets back in office, the stock market will be solid. I'm going to make money again. I'll be able to, no, because the bubble is going to burst, and it is going to be on a scale not seen, I think, maybe in human history. And that will be the opportunity for the cabal, or whatever you want to call it, to reset everything. And you are going to have the clash of the titans at that point. And so I see him more as a figure, again, I keep using that word, shepherding us through a very dark, dark time. And I don't even like to say that, but man, we got to face reality, because you can't have 34 trillion in debt. I mean, this is purposeful. That they are trying to create a debt situation in a way that cannot be solved, so that when the pin goes in the bubble, they can just move in. And they've got their structure all in place. We need to understand that. So,
well, I mean, the folks who don't see how they're rejecting the dollar don't understand that these countries have already set up their own monetary system. It's not like the debt is going to vanish. The system is going to be replaced. That's
how the debt disappears.
Right. So you can't pull out of thin air $34 billion worth of payback.
Trillion.
Or trillions. So you have to overhaul the system. And I think that's already set up. That's already set up with the World Health Organization, the WTO, All of these countries are already ready to shove the dollar, destroy the monetary system that we're under right now, and just go completely digital. It's already ready to
Oh
go.
yeah, no question. This is reset Bretton Woods 2.0.
Yes. And most
And
people don't know what Brentwood is. And they're clueless. I can walk out the door and ask 15 people, what is Brentwood? They won't know. For the sake of telling you guys, those who don't know, it was literally the transference of all of the wealth of Europe into the United States dollar in order to rebuild Europe. That all happened in, I think, 1944. They're called the Bretton Woods Accord. And the dollar became the dominant currency across the globe. That's all getting ready to happen, guys, in order to dump the dollar and the wealth of the United States of America.
yeah, I mean that the only thing the cabal, the empire, whatever, the only thing it knows how to do is to steal everything. So it's, it's systematically stealing all of your resources. I just read, like, this is so bizarre. It's very hard for me to get my arms around all this, but part of when the system resets is they plan to turn nature, that would be mountains and lakes and rivers and trees, into assets, not resources, assets that can be traded on Wall Street and controlled. Like, my brain cannot even fathom, but that's part of what they are planning to reset. There's no way you and I and we the people, we individuals, I mean, you just look at this and go, this isn't possible. I mean, what can I do? And so we will need leaders that help us understand what it is we're up against. Not that we worship, not that we expect to fix everything, but those that can help us navigate through what's ahead. We really need that kind of leadership, because the average person isn't going to know what hit him. I mean, I don't know that I'm going to know what hit me.
You know what's ironic about Donald Trump is he represents those type of leaders throughout history, whether it be in this United States, whether it be the biblical characters that we've all come to love and appreciate and study for the last 3,800 years. But he represents the common sense kind of mentality that can lift people up out of the places of destitution and hopelessness. He represents that type of person. Now, I agree with you. He's not the magic pill. However, if what we have, if something should happen, who else? Let me ask you this question, Dana. Who else in the world, besides the guy down in Argentina, comes even close to the person that Donald Trump is? I mean,
Precisely,
name one other person. Now, and it's not that I want people to understand something. I support Donald Trump because I knew of him growing up in New York. Everybody did.
Right.
I know what kind of man he is. He's a straight shooter. There's no BS in him. But I was a kid through all my formative years. But we all knew people wanted to work at the Trump company because of what Donald Trump did in the impoverished communities, whether it was Black, whether it was Chicano, Puerto Rican. It didn't matter. Those are the people that were brought into his organization to build up the Trump business, and everybody knew that. And then if you look at all the videos and things that were recorded when he was with Jesse Jackson or whatever, there's a history of what he did and what his organization did to help the underprivileged rise up above their situation. So, but on the other hand, if God is really truly behind sustaining Donald Trump, the question becomes why? Why has God put his hand on this man's life? And like you, Dina, I think it's maybe to guide us through hell on earth, or certainly hell in America. I kind of think that. I've been thinking that for quite some time now. It's interesting how you and I seem to have the same kind of thought from time to time whenever we get together. But I've been thinking the same thing for a while now. And I also think that if God's involved in this, then that's where the majority of your hope should be, because nobody can beat God. Nobody can stop what he's doing. Go ahead.
American Christians have this sort of, I hate to use the word, kind of Pollyanna view of God, that he's just going to rescue them from all of this turmoil that's ahead, chaos, turmoil, you name it. But that's, he doesn't necessarily raise up leaders to so you can escape. He raises up leaders to help you walk through it, to give you some guidance and direction and maybe some guardrails through it. I mean, we did have sort of Pax Israel for a period with King Solomon, but then look, he went off the rails. I mean, you can't, there's no leader on planet Earth that is going to meet your expectations of perfection. But
Right.
there are leaders raised up for a certain time and a certain place for a purpose. I mean, you think of any of our, George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, but look at the hell they went through in the Civil War. It's not, I don't want people to think just because he got into office, if that's how this all plays out, that all your problems are going away. I think
Well,
in some ways they're just going to begin.
there's a whole lot of people that plan on creating all kinds of problems if he gets in. So
yeah.
Now I wrote an article earlier today, and I was thinking about it. And what spurred the article was, what religious system has changed human behavior? None that None that I can think of. Human behavior is exactly the way it is today that it was 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago. I mean, there's times of peace and there's times of chaos. The peaceful times almost always follow the chaos, but the chaos is what causes hell. So it's like, it doesn't matter what century you're in. You can go back to any century or any millennium and see the same behavior.
Yep.
Somebody's trying to take control over the lives of other people. And if they don't like it, they either put them to death or enslave them. This is the reality of humanity, not Christianity, Judaism, Islam. Go through all of the world religions. Not one of them have given humanity an enduring peace and a love for one another. Yeah. It all goes down the drain at some point all the time.
Yeah, it's always the human heart. It comes down to that. I've been going back and really reviewing sort of the Roman world, since that is the world in which the New Testament was written. And there are many things that, Yeshua or has said, or, Paul is alluding to, that are like head scratchers. What on earth is he talking about? So I've been really trying to dig in there. I mean, I understand that the filter too of the New Testament is the Exodus. We see Exodus language, especially through the Gospels, and Acts and things like that. But the Roman world, it's so complex and big, and it's hard to understand all its moving parts. But I've gone back to try to reread, refresh, and try to understand the context of the New Testament better than I have. I still struggle with it, but it was interesting to me. One of the things that you find in ancient Rome, the word religion, religio, is where it comes from, and it actually meant the ties that bind people together. That's all it meant. So there was no demarcation, if you will, between the secular and the religious, quote unquote. It was just the idea of binding people together, or religion was embedded in all parts of society. Every system, institution of society had that. And so we don't have in the ancient Roman world an independent religious category like we do now. That's challenging, but it is an important filter for looking at the New Testament, I think. Is Paul, they're not speaking of religion. Okay. So that idea of how do we bind people together? And so this binding together of the quote Christian community, the Jewish community, or whatever, its purpose wasn't to separate it out and have it be religious. I mean, one of the things that Rome did, their media, if you will, was the temple worship, all that kind of propaganda with monuments and public festivals, and they used all that. That was what their media propaganda was. They used all that stuff, but not as we've talked about. It wasn't used in a religious sense. It was, how can we continually pull people and bind them together? And the one group essentially in the Roman world that defied all this were the Christians, but not religiously, but they had a contrarian view of imperial power. And so the New Testament gives us that roadmap of how, what do you do when you live under imperial power?
You create another one.
Well, that is true. When in doubt, do as
Well, I
the
mean,
Romans, right?
when you say the Christians were unique in that, but they weren't so unique that they didn't follow the same template, because what we ended up with was a religious system that forced people to bond together.
Well, I'm not speaking of, the Catholic Church system, the universal church. And that developed out of the cities because they needed to, you understand the ecclesia is a political term that
Right.
of a hierarchy political structure, not a church religious. Again, they just didn't
Thank
have.
you for saying, you know what? Thank you for saying that. I've actually researched that out and found out that this was a system within the Roman government that,
Yeah.
I don't know if it was more of a Nazi type system or if it was just a system that managed the rules and regulations of whatever Rome was trying to accomplish. But that's
Well, you
literally
need
what it
that.
meant.
Yeah. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you need order, and
Right.
rules and laws, create order. So it was logical. It's not religious like we're talking about. So one of the things you find in the Roman world is these people were sandwiched together like in tenement housing in these cities. You had this great conflict between the urban world and the rural world. But most people, this is just the tactic of empire, is to force everybody into the urban centers. And they were just cesspools. I mean, they didn't have really good septic systems, and the everything just kind of ran out in the streets. Lord knows the disease and stuff. And they were just, like third world tenement housing, if you were to go to, I don't know, pick a city in Bangkok or something. And it was, everybody knew everybody's business, and you lived one on top of another, essentially. So imagine being a Christian in that environment. I mean, you are living in extremely close quarters with people. And so if you are going to step away, push back, or not attend a public feast to the emperor, everybody was going to know that. Everybody knew your business. It's different now. We can live in our little houses and do our life, and nobody necessarily knows what we're doing unless we post it on Facebook. But you can get around all that. And you could not. So it wasn't like you could have your private life. Your life was as public, as you could imagine. So being a Christian in that environment, whoa, that was some bravery, to stand up. That was some courage that was seen in the public space.
Well, I've seen some of those ruins. In fact, when you talk about, septic systems and whatnot, I saw the septic system in several of the cities, because when we went to Turkey and Asia Minor and Greece, we visited all of these ancient ruins, Ephesus and Corinth, and the septic systems were particularly of interest to me because I've been in plumbing for the last 30 years. And the way they would use these outhouses or these public bathrooms, I mean, you could sit there and say, hey, could you hand me the toilet paper, if they even had toilet paper, because you were that close to each other. And then everything wasn't flushed like a toilet. It went downstream because they had created a means for it to flow, but it was flowing in hot, humid air.
It just sounds wonderful. I mean,
it's gross.
Yeah,
but
totally
well, here's the problem we have. When we look at those things and we think about those things, we somehow get a picture of people being less than what we are today because we have toilets. But that system worked for them. It kept these civilizations going for centuries. And we need to understand these people were not they were not idiotic in how they were forced to live. We're the product of what they developed. We
Yeah.
just, and so, but we still have to understand that the nature of humanity was still just as prevalent as it was then as it is today. So when you're talking about living piled up onto, I've seen that. I've seen those systems. I've seen how the Roman Empire uh, built its houses. The houses were part of the community. All you had to do was go a couple of steps away to the market, wherever you were.
Right.
So it was like, but at the same time, how did Rome control the people? How did Rome assert its authority over the people? How did people have particular allegiance to Rome? You're absolutely right. It wasn't because of religion, but a lot of it had to do with the man-made gods that kind of drove the community. And of course, all of the Caesars were considered gods. So in a way, it was still, you were still being controlled, so to
Oh,
speak.
absolutely. Well, the whole system was a system of control. I mean, temples, they were basically commercial centers for buying and selling and trading and, and where you had to deal with interest, et cetera, et cetera. So all
And government.
and government, the temples and the monuments, the inscriptions, the festivals, the great oratory, their currency coinage, the games, all of these were mechanisms of control. And if, like I said, if you didn't participate, if you were a Christian who refused to participate in this stuff, everybody knew it. You could not hide. And of course, all of this was so that the emperor guaranteed this sort of this peace, like the
Protection.
Augustus Pax Romana thing. And the idea, the part of the propaganda was to communicate how Rome was a sort of very beneficent, well-ordered society. But the dark underbelly of Rome, it's no different today than the dark underbelly of America with the fentanyl crisis and this massive invasion and the sex trafficking and the human traffic. I mean, it's that underbelly that a lot of us, I will readily admit, I don't want to see it. I don't want to know about it, but I can't not know about it because it's going on and it is destroying humanity. And so the goal is always the biblical story is about how to raise up humanity, how to lift all boats and pour into human beings, human flourishing. And again, those two systems collide, the destructive, the de-industrial, the the de-banking, the whatever, take your D, this violation of human life, the inhumanity. And then you see the Bible tells the story of how God takes circumstances that are real, people that are real, going through the same stuff. And then you look in the story, how does he raise them up? How does he impart into them this idea of human flourishing? How do they overcome? What is the creational aspect of the story? Because the story is the same going back, to the beginning to now. It's the same story of human life. But the Bible has a different story to tell on how to give humans their dignity.
Dina, it's interesting because one of the reasons I asked you to listen to Rabbi Kessin was because he kind of talked about this. He said of America, and he was more talking about towards the end of the age being a relatively new country, but it was the first country where individual freedoms and liberties were the voice of the nation. And it was unlike anything the world had ever seen. And so he says this was different. The United States was different in that, to your point, the embracing of a person's ability to live life and live it to its fullest and have choices and opportunities was based on that freedom and that whole thing about why does life exist in the first place. In fact, I agree with you 100%. Every single person that we admire in biblical speak was trying to be free from the system that would take their freedom away, whether we're talking about Noah, whether we're talking about Adam, whether we're talking about Abraham, Moses, all of them were trying to get freedom as the cornerstone of how they were able to live their life. And it's no different today.
No.
In fact, the United States of America, through government, has been imposing literally what they want to accomplish, as opposed to what the individual person was given an opportunity to accomplish. And that to me is why I see this. So at somewhere, God is going to interrupt the destruction of what he has set out to do, because he always has. He's always tried to free people. And
Well,
I
the
think the
thing
United
too,
States is heading for that. I think we're heading for that confrontation. That's what I think.
and the hallmark of liberty and freedom is accountability and responsibility
Yep.
and oversight of your behavior and all of that. Like, if that part does not change for America, I don't care who's leading the charge.
Right.
It's not going to go well. We will remain in chaos. So this is a call, a clarion call. It's the reason that the empire is so successful, because if you're not accountable to anything, you just keep that ship going. Look at it. But that is the greatest danger, I think, for any nation is not being held, things not being held to account, people not being responsible for their actions, for the things that they do, the things that they say, all of that. Everything has a consequence, and we have just thrown consequence out the window. So it will require, a leader for a time, and people not serving a leader, without thought and just following along because it feels good. As somebody is guiding and navigating us through the nightmare, we have to take responsibility ourselves and be a part of that. Yeah, and if that doesn't happen, there's no point.
And that's to your point about, the Christian community. One of the reasons why we've lost a lot of our freedoms is because the Christian community, uh, broken up into denominational infrastructure, has not accepted responsibility for the freedoms and the covenant that God gave to this nation. Because quite frankly, this generation and probably the last two generations don't understand the obligation and what that really means.
Yeah.
And so we have a government and institution full of institutions that, and I believe this with all of my heart, our institutions were perverted in the last 16 years of our country in order to rule over people, because all of those folks who have said that your Justice Department, your executive branch, they don't mean anything to us. We're going to do whatever we want. And that's what we're seeing happen in our country. And the people that really kind of, put their faith in the God of the Bible have not, in my opinion, held themselves accountable to what those instructions are. And so we've kind of handed the ship off.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a problem. And I know from just knowing the biblical text, there is one heck of a consequence to pay when everything hits the fan, if I could say it that way.
Yeah, best to say it that way. Well,
But
the infiltration, I think, has been complete, and whatever you
yes,
want to call it, the Marxist, leftist, progress. I don't know. There's a million in communist. I don't know, whatever. But that infiltration, I believe, has been complete, and every institution has been taken over, and the church as an institution has been infiltrated and taken over. And so all the principles of the Marxist cabal are now operating in the church, and we have got to stand, up against this. I just ordered a book, and it's not here yet, by a gal named Megan Basham, and I forget the title, Shepherds of something or other. I'll think of it after the podcast, of course. But where she traces the roots of this infiltration, and I'm not sure how far back she goes, but watching what's happening with some of these big leaders of these mega churches and going off the rails, and just again to your point about this loss of accountability and responsibility, and the bigger, the more bureaucratic, the more top heavy it gets, and I don't think that's ever the way God really designed a healthy community is. And so Americans, I mean, we're going to have to figure out a way, whether you're saying we're, Christian Americans or American and patriotic, but we are going to have to figure out a way to organize ourselves through the next cycle that we're headed for. Things cannot be business as usual. Like we're just done. And I think people need to see it in a new way. And again, Trump is not our savior. I'm pretty sure most of us listening to this podcast know that. But we do believe, and I do, that he was preserved and protected for this moment, but not so we can be fat, dumb, and happy and rich and financially free, but to help us help our communities go through this extremely difficult and challenging time that's ahead.
Well, I think to I don't know. When I sit and listen, I listen to a couple of YouTube videos with all these prophetic messages, and the one thing they all have in common is they don't understand the Torah and they don't understand the history. So I just kind of go, okay, this is loony, and I turn it off. But without crashing and burning, I think one of the biggest two things that have happened to the church concept is, number one, the 503
501c3.
501c3 and the rapture kind of conversation. Of all the people groups in the planet, the church with 36,000 different denominations about one particular story that happens to be Jewish is going to be taken out of the earth, and or these mega churches have to align themselves to government now in order to even operate. And so we're kind of losing it on two different fronts. We believe something that, in my opinion, is not going to happen. And we've aligned ourselves in order to be a business, and I said business, with the government system that is pretty much duct taped the church and told it you're inconsequential, you don't have it, you're feckless in the culture, sit down and shut up, or we're going to take your 501c3 away. And so we don't have the kind of people that can inspire a believer to literally take back the land. We don't have that anymore.
Yeah.
It just doesn't exist.
Well, honestly, it will be a miracle if Donald Trump does win. And like I said, it's not going to be perfect, but I wanted to just run through. There are 12 different ways that they cheat. There is virtually no way to overcome this. And I'm not doing this to depress you, but for you to face reality that if God has preserved him for this moment, this is going to have to be overcome. And I'll just go through these really quickly. So first of all, the mail-in ballots, I think you've all seen the holes in that and how much fraud takes place, and states violating their own election laws in doing this. We have ballot harvesting. And now the government is providing these illegal immigration centers with ballots. They don't even speak English. They don't understand what anything's saying, but all of these ballots are being mailed to illegal alien immigration centers to fill out ballots. That's number 2. Number 3, drop boxes are not being monitored. Number 4, we got ballot stuffing. You saw the movie 2000 Mules. Number 5, the voter rolls have not been updated. They have not been cleaned. Only in a very few states. I think Florida is one that's kind of done that. We know the voting machines are deadly. Okay. They are connected to the internet. There's little security. When they go in, they leave no digital footprint, and you can easily manipulate and switch votes for the candidates. Number 6, I think I'm on, or 7, the Albert sensors. You probably never heard of that, but it's under the purview of the Department of Homeland Security. It's called the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, which is like a lot of gobbledygook. It's supposed to be an intrusion detection system for local governments to see who's trying to hack their system. But all it does is give the government complete access into the local system to do whatever it is they want. We have interruptions in elections like power outages and cyber attacks. We have corrupt secretaries of state. What happened in our state is the counties have numbers. They send them off to the Secretary of State. She's the one who was actually responsible to give the final numbers on the count and sent them back to the counties for the county to put their housekeeping seal of approval on that. So it came out of the Secretary of State's office, not the precincts. We have China. China has a complete system, organizational system to register voters. Okay. They've got groups running in 50 different states. So China is registering voters, if you can even get your hand around that. They have created geographical precinct maps run by a guy, American guy, Stephen something Phillips, I think. And he's a geographer, and he's being run out of the Wuhan University. We have the natural bad actors, hackers, etc. But the latest one, you may or may not be familiar with, they're called Smurfs. And this is funneling money, large amounts of money, probably foreign money. There's like the Swiss billionaire guys pumped, I don't know, 20 million into the races. But the money is donations to Act Blue, which is Black Lives Matter organization. And it's a money laundering operation. So a person will give, say, $20 to the Democrat Party. They then take their name and their card information. They don't charge their card, but it's a way to launder the money, this massive amount of money, to be able to funnel it into Democrat coffers. And so people will find out later, maybe, that they've made 20,000 donations for $5 and they have no idea what's going on. So that whole scam's called Smurfs. So look at that. Like that's like a tsunami coming after you. And so against all that, the Republicans are doing kind of nothing. They won't even know what hit them. And so I say all that because, to me, if he overcomes all that, truly the Lord has a plan for the nation, because in the natural, it's impossible. Okay. So, and this is reality sandwich, folks. It just is what it is. And we're not prepared for it. Please prepare yourself. And so I pray that we're right, that God has raised up Donald Trump for this time, for a purpose, not to be the savior of the world and not to give you lots of money, but to help us navigate through what's ahead, because we will need leaders. And, like you said earlier, what other leader would you want at this time? And is he going to be perfect? And, does he have ties in places we wouldn't like? I'm sure all of that's true. But the Lord is gracious and loves this country and loves the world and loves the people in it. And if, we know the old adage, if America goes, so goes everywhere. So this is just, I want you to face facts. This is what's ahead.
And I'm not so sure, having listened to all 12 of what you just recited, I hadn't heard about the Smurfs. That's new to me, so I have to give me something to go look at. But I'm not so sure. The biggest problem that we would have come November is if we didn't go out and vote in mass numbers, in almost supernatural numbers. But I'm not sure that that's going to make a difference if they decide they're going to cheat, right, and they're going to steal the election. However, if we do absolutely nothing, then they don't have to do as much as they can do. Yes, and I believe this whole voting fraudulent stuff, this has been something I think has been tested for probably the last 40 years. And now it's kind of like the AIDS thing. The AIDS was tested, and now we've got COVID. These are things that were man-made in order to control outcomes. And I'm sitting here watching all of this, and I'm going, if the average, particularly if the believing community does not participate in the vote or does not participate in changing the dynamic in their local communities, then we're just basically handing the country to people who want it to go away.
Yeah.
And I don't know if God stops that from happening, it'll be because there's a much, much, much bigger purpose of America than any of us have ever known. And that's what I'm hoping for.
Well, back to accountability and responsibility. As a citizen of the United States, you absolutely have the responsibility to go and vote, no matter what. And I know there's a lot of debate on the best way. Should we wait till the day of? I'm not really in favor of that anymore, only because of the CrowdStrike hack. I think they could just take down every voting machine, because they already infiltrated the voting machines on that day, that they could do that. So please get out and take people and do. I mean, we got to do this. God doesn't just, he expects us to be a partner with him and to take responsibility. And this is our responsibility, is to vote. So I'm praying that you all, I know last time 30 million evangelicals didn't even go to the polls. So yes, you know, the theme too big to rig, I hope and pray that's true. I just want to be able to I want to see it clearly as it is, because then we'll know if we get out there and we do everything that, you know, we can do, and he wins, I'm going to say here and now, I'm going to believe that it's an absolute miracle.
Well, I would caution people, you know, the old song, Jesus Take the Wheel.
Yeah.
I'm at the place, and I mean this what I'm about to say. If Jesus has to take the wheel in order to get you to be motivated to take back the land, then he'll probably park the car in China. And you got to understand, I completely agree with Dina. God said, you do this and I'll do that.
Yeah.
He didn't say, sit down, wait for me to bring the bus, and we'll all get out of here. He said, if you do this, I will do that. And then he said, if you don't do this, this is what's going to happen.
Yep.
Well, I believe that we're in the this is what's going to happen moment. And I've said this for a couple of years now, Dina. You know I've said this. Everybody's waiting to see God judge. And I'm sitting here saying the fact that we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing with regard to keeping the statutes, commandments, and laws of the King of the creation, we're in the judgment. We're in the consequences now. How bad do you want it to get? Dina, we got just a couple minutes left. I'll give you the last word.
Well, just I thank God mostly every day for his mercy and grace and his love for, you know, humanity, for this nation, for all of the world, that he is still holding this thing together. Because if not for his hand, I don't even think we could process the level of chaos that we would be facing. And so I remain grateful that for that mercy and grace keeps me going, sustains me, his compassion and his love. I stand on that, and that I have a responsibility as a human and a citizen of this country to act and to do whatever it takes to see that his hand is moving across the land. And on behalf of those, I mean, there's so many people suffering in ways we can't even imagine. And this is heartbreaking. And you know, not necessarily through any fault of their own. Maybe it you know, we won't get into that. But God loves those, and he will rescue those that are suffering. But he expects us to do our part in helping with that. We're not just leaving it all up to him, and we're going to exit stage left. So I'm grateful, but we got to roll up our sleeves, and we got work to do.
Well, folks, there you go. I mean, this is what we've been talking about. We've been talking about our responsibility as believers to kind of help right the ship. And I think Dina's said it best. I mean, there's nothing else left to say. So I want to thank you guys for joining us today. Dina, thank you for coming on. I appreciate you. And about real quick, talk about your class that you're doing. You're doing
yeah, it's
12
called
week.
The Temple Revealed course. It's a 12-week course, and it helps to take you back into the ancient world so that you have a good, solid foundation to understand the scriptures. The scriptures were written to an ancient Near East audience, and that would be the Old Testament and the New Testament. And to help you, like we were talking a little bit about ancient Rome, to understand that culture and context. So if you're interested in taking that class, just send me an email. It's very simple. Dinahdy, DINAHDYE at protonmail.com. The next class is going to be starting up after Labor Day. And so if you have an interest, send me a note and I'll get you in the class.
Say your email again slowly.
Dinahdy at protonmail.com. PROTONMAIL.com.
And if you guys, if those of you who listen to the show need that information, I have her email address. I'm also doing something. I don't know if you can see this.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm putting together another Bible study. There's a glare on that. But in conjunction with what Dina just said, the scriptures is about the legal systems that of the ancient world. I mean, how was government done? What was the suzerain and vassal language that bound these communities together? I'm putting this together. I'm probably going to do it here in my house or in various homes in the local area. If you're interested in being a part of that, just reach out to me. Just contact me or let me know on Facebook, because I am going. This is something that Rico Cortez put together years ago. And it helped me understand exactly what Dina just said about understanding the ancient world and the language that the Bible uses when talking about the legalistic things that Jesus was doing and the disciples were doing and all of the Bernie Sanders and the Hillary Clintons that they ran up against. And I'll say it that way because those people existed back then too, or that mindset. So this is Jeff. That's the end of my show. We'll see you guys next week. God bless you. Thanks again, Dina. We're out of here. Bye. That was the wrong one.